Tonight, crews are still combing through the ruins of the station, searching for more answers in the deadliest U.S. nightclub fire in decades. Now a command center is open for friends and families as they search for their loved ones believed to be inside the inferno. I'm Patrice Wood, and this is a special edition of News Channel 10 at 11, the station nightclub fire in West Warwick.
And I'm Gene Valicenti across the street from the worst fatal fire in Rhode Island history on Coeusett Avenue in West Warwick. Let's bring you up to date. The death toll at this hour has risen to 96. The governor calls this the fourth worst fatal fire in U.S. history. 7 victims have been positively ID'd. 200 injured all told. 187 taken to area hospitals. Some have been released. Now, here is the breakdown on where people are tonight. 39 remain at Rhode Island Hospital. 10 at Kent. 4 at Miriam. 3 at Fatima. In Massachusetts, 9 are at Mass General, 8 at Brigham and Women's, 4 at UMass Worcester, 3 at the Shriners, 1 at St. Luke's. Today's developments, there are many. They include confirmation now of a criminal investigation underway, a response from club owners contradicting the band's claim that they gave permission to use pyrotechnics. We've got 2 sides of the story now. And the back and forth on numbers all day long. How many people were in the club? Was it overcrowded or not? There's conflicting information on that. Governor Kachiri, just a little while ago, wrapping up a news conference. He's been the point man for most of the day on information. As we said, he had this to say just a little while ago.
This evening, the site will be basically secured. In other words, all of the work in terms of looking for any additional bodies, that will be complete. We have confirmed 7 identifications for certain matched up with families. We have found, and I'll just say that some additional evidence of the kinds of pyrotechnic equipment that was used here. We found some of it stored on the site. That's under the control of the fire marshal, and that'll give us a better understanding as we get into that as to what materials were used and so forth.
News Channel 10's Ted Daniel joining us now with the latest on the early investigation. Ted?
Gene, as you mentioned, 96 bodies have been recovered and 7 so far have been identified. And the governor saying this evening in a late press conference that they believe that 8 more will be able to be identified possibly by tonight. So that's a total of 15 bodies, 15 bodies out of 96. That's how many they say right now they will be able to identify. They say they may have to resort to medical records, dental records, and DNA with some of the other bodies. Now tonight, the site here is going to be secured. They're going to close it off until a team of federal investigators can come and start re-examining the scene here. The team's expected to arrive tomorrow. A lot of work to be done today and a lot of developments today. This is a constantly changing story. A tragic story that has affected not just this community, but affected the entire country. Let's get you caught up on some of the day's events. Digging through the debris, investigators work around the clock, sifting through the rubble. At this point, they believe all the bodies have been recovered from what's left of the station nightclub. Fire chaplain Father Don Milligan compares the scene to Ground Zero.
I think it's the same, only on a smaller basis. I was saying earlier, I saw more whole bodies here since this morning than I did in weeks at Ground Zero.
The bodies have been taken to the state medical examiner's office for the difficult process of identification. Governor Don Kachiri says in some cases they may have to use DNA.
We are bringing in more resources now from neighboring states in the medical examiner's capacity, so we can go 24 hours around the clock, and we're going to give maximum priority to identification.
More than 180 survivors remain in area hospitals, at least a dozen believed to be in critical condition.
Everyone that's been in the hospital has been identified. Those lists are at the Crown Plaza for the families.
State and federal investigators have launched a major investigation into this fire, started when a pyrotechnics display was ignited during a concert performed by the rock group Great White. The West Warwick fire chief says neither the band or the club's owners applied for the required permit to use pyrotechnics. And even if they had, one would not have been granted.
They did not get permission through our department. But there are obviously some concerts inside buildings where there are pyrotechnics. What distinguished this from those types of concerts?
I would say the size of the building, the construction of the building, the occupancy of the building.
Now, the fire chief saying that this building just not a building for these type of pyrotechnics. Now, a sort of a blame game has begun between the lead singer of Great White, the band, and the owners of the club, both giving different stories. The lead singer, Jack Russell, has said publicly, he's appeared on television all last night and today, saying that the band was given permission to use those pyrotechnics. However, the owners of the club, Jeff and Michael Dudarian, released a statement through their lawyer earlier today that reads, "At no time did either owner have prior knowledge that pyrotechnics were going to be used by the band Great White. No permission was ever requested by the band or its agents to use pyrotechnics at the station, and no permission was ever given." Now, the Attorney General's office is leading this investigation now, and that is one of the major things they're going to be looking at, who may be responsible and who may be held accountable for this fire. Gene?
All right, Ted, thanks, and I know you'll be joining us a little later in the broadcast. Now, this has no doubt been one of the longest days for relatives agonizing over the fate of their loved ones, and News Channel 10's Kelly McGee continues our coverage.
Well, Gene, things change so quickly here at the scene, from a rescue mission to a recovery operation. Even so, firefighters have shown a great deal of respect. Every time a victim's body is discovered throughout the day, they would pause and take off their hats. Now, tonight, there is still so much sadness and uncertainty among the victims' families as they wait for that phone call that could confirm the worst. The chaos is gone. Devastation is setting in. Every story heartbreaking.
I've been calling all over, finding out through Red Cross and everything, and they're not giving us any information right now at this time, they said. So I just gotta sit back and wait for somebody to call us.
Candy's stepdaughter Tina is missing. Tina is a 33-year-old mother of two.
They've been checking all the local area hospitals. And
they're calling for Andrea and Steve. The couple was last seen inside the club.
There's so many unidentified people right now, so I'm not really ruling out anything right now. They're out there somewhere, and I'm just hoping someone saw them.
It's too new, and it's very hard to wrap your mind around.
Relatives of the missing spent an agonizing day on the phone, desperately hoping for positive news. With walls collapsing around them, toxic smoke blinding them, firefighters made desperate, heroic attempts to save the critically burned.
It just went woof, and it just crawled the wall. And once it caught on, it went so fast. I grabbed as many people as I could and took them out.
Tonight, the victims and their families are in the thoughts of many southern New Englanders.
You see it on TV, but to come here and feel it, it's just totally different. See the sadness.
Well, the Red Cross, various agencies, and members of the clergy have been assisting these families, trying to help them get more information as the difficult and painful process of identifying the victims begins.
Kelly, thanks. Let's continue our coverage now with more from Patrice Ward. Patrice?
Yes, Gene, we just have to wonder how many children are without their mothers and fathers tonight, and how many parents are without their sons and daughters. It is a tragedy. We were all here overnight watching as rescues and private ambulances from all over the regions rushed to nearly 200 people to the hospital after the nightclub fire. 60 of those victims were transported to nearby Kent Hospital in Warwick. Some of those people needed to be flown by helicopter to other hospitals. A doctor with a military background explains what he's seen.
This was by far the worst thing that I've ever seen. The only thing that would come close to it is the idea of drills. But these were real patients. It's something that stays with all the people involved, not just the family members, but the professional staff for the rest of their lives and career. It was definitely the worst thing I've ever seen.
10 victims are now in Kent Hospital. They are listed in good or serious condition. The emergency distress call went out at Rhode Island Hospital. This is the only level 1 trauma center in the state. 64 people were taken to Rhode Island Hospital from the station nightclub. We spoke to one victim from her hospital bed.
I remember seeing a guy pulling me through the window. And I said, thank you so much, thank you so much. And I said, I'm gonna die, aren't I? And he said, no, but I have to go back in. There's more people that need my help.
And this was a firefighter or a rescue, or just a
I think he was just an ongoer. Just helping everyone out.
Just wonder how many people died helping others. 7 victims have been identified. Investigators hope to identify more in the morning. Tonight, News Channel 10's Margie O'Brien spoke with one of the first rescue workers on the scene, and she joins us live with his emotional story. Margie?
Good evening, Patrice. A lot of the fire workers who were here last night are on the clock tonight. Many of them work 2 shifts on, 2 shifts off. Now, those who are home are probably trying to catch up on some sleep, but the only problem when they close their eyes to get rid of those awful images.
The initial reports were there was entrapment. We didn't know what we were coming into.
Nelson Pedro heard the call and knew the venue. He didn't realize it would be an absolute nightmare until he saw the victims.
We definitely had some critical patients. There were people being carried over by bystanders. There was people being driven over in pickup trucks.
A triage area was immediately created right across the street.
They were literally tapping you on the shoulder, like, can I come with you? You know, it was just, when you first started working on the patients, by the time I lifted my head again, 4 more patients, you lifted up and there were 10 more. And just got to be more and more. I had actually people following me when I was rolling my stretcher out to my truck, behind us, walking behind us, to sit in my rescue so they could get a ride to the hospital.
Sure, a firefighter goes through a rigorous training, but nothing could have prepared them for this. Carnage, devastation, and people crying out for help.
We got these burn patients that you can't even get a blood pressure on because, you just can't. It's too painful for them. It's hard to put a cardiac monitor on those patients because you're putting these stickers on these patients' chest and they're not sticking because the skin's coming off with it.
Stress counselors offered to help firefighters sift through their feelings. That offers some comfort, but the real support comes from the brothers, Pedro says, who were right there beside you.
Is it okay if you just break down someday and have a good cry?
Yeah, it is. It's okay.
Now, Nelson Pedro has restocked his rig after exhausting all supplies last night. As you can see, he is at work, hoping he doesn't get the same kind of call tonight or ever. Gene, back to you.
Margie, thanks. Many of our viewers have been following this since it broke last night, overnight, through the night, this morning, through the day. A look back now at the past 24 hours and the storyline as we know it. News of the fire would break around 11:15. Vague at first, a fire at a nightclub with reports of people trapped. It would become more clear just minutes later. Listen to a neighbor describe the scene. What do you see?
There's flames from all over the building. The entire building is in flames right now.
Shaken survivors would start to relay the basic facts.
It was just bad, just seeing people in flames and hearing their screams.
Lead band member Jack Russell would go on the record right after midnight.
There's some pyro going, and all of a sudden the next thing you know, the whole thing went up.
The hospitals soon starting to relay the extent of their involvement.
We have set up a site in the hospital.
By 2:30 a.m., confirmation concerning the first word of fatalities.
Well, the situation right now is really quite grim. They are in the process of removing the bodies that they found by the front door of the club.
Overnight, the death toll rises. 10 to 20, 39, 60 plus, then 95. The story leads the network morning shows and goes on to dominate the day.
First, a story that we've been reporting all morning, a horrible scene at a nightclub in Rhode Island.
Developments coming by the hour, news conferences, numbers, another side of the story. The club's owners issued a statement contradicting the band leader's assertion that they had okayed the use of pyrotechnics, along with more stories of survival.
And I lay there and I must have passed out. But I really thought I died.
And what was the next thing?
Amazing 24 hours, the death toll, of course, rising from 95 to 96 tonight. The Associated Press reports that this is now the worst nightclub fire in U.S. history since the 1977 fire at the Beverly Hills Supper Club in Southgate, Kentucky, where 165 people died.
This isn't the first time the band used pyrotechnics. Up next, we'll hear from another club owner about his experience just last week. And we'll look back at some of the other major fires in New England's history. Live pictures tonight of where the Station nightclub used to be. Great White made one other concert appearance in New England this week. The rock band played a show in Bangor, Maine Tuesday night. It's unclear whether the band used pyrotechnics during that show. A spokesperson for Maine's Public Safety Department says the state fire marshal did not issue a permit for pyrotechnics. But last Friday night, Great White performed in New Jersey. The club there says Great White did use pyrotechnics. Reporter Andrea Strasmu has more from Asbury Park.
The legendary stone pony on the beach in Asbury Park has borne some incredible careers, the likes of New Jersey's own Bruce Springsteen. 1 week ago, the Great White took the stage here, and within seconds, the club's production crew feared for the safety of the 300 people cramming the stage.
The band themselves were, being showered with these sparks. They have hair, they have clothing, they have eyes. The crowd is so very close to that it, in my opinion, was a very serious risk.
According to those inside at the time, the band used sparks of fire as a crowd thriller to open their show. The club's owner says he had no idea the band would use pyrotechnics, and he points out there's no mention of it in several pages of the contract that describes everything in the performance from A to Z.
On this event on February 14th, not once were we told that there were going to be any pyrotechnics whatsoever.
Santana says the club would have never allowed it, and seeing the spectacle firsthand, he says he cannot believe disaster didn't strike here.
Thank God that we're still here today to speak about that. I've taken it as a terroristic threat that band members come in and position the safety of people's lives on the line without us knowing.
The president of Great White's management company said that he did not have specific knowledge of the show at the Stone Pony. Here's what else he had to say: that I would refute for the simple purpose that I know that our tour manager always checks that pyrotechnics are able to be used and that the club authorizes it. Radio station 94HJY did not sponsor the show at the Station nightclub, but it played a role in promoting the show where the tragedy happened, and now one of their own is missing. The promotions department was there, as well as one of their disc jockeys, Mike Gonsalves, the doctor, Dr. Metal as he's called. He has not been heard from since the fire. Gonsalves is the longest tenured DJ at HJY and has the longest running heavy metal show in the country.
You'd never in a million years or in your wildest dreams believe that something this horrific would happen, right here.
He'd like to maybe put out the gruff exterior that he was the doctor and the heavy metal madman, but, he would live vicariously through anyone who has kids, loved kids, hung out with them, and then everyone who was married would live vicariously through him in his single life.
Again, Dr. Metal among the missing in the fire. 94HJY did not sponsor the show, but it gave away tickets on the air to promote the event and had a team giving away T-shirts before the band went on stage. They all made it out okay. Let's go back out live to the scene of the fire. Gene?
Yeah, hi, Patrice. Some time passing now, as you know, and the vehicles have been replaced. The fire trucks have been replaced by some other vehicles. The feds are here with the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms crime scene unit, or at least a processing unit. That's right behind me. New England has seen its fair share of devastating fires, some captured by the newspapers, others by newsreels. History provides a common thread: a fire that starts without warning, spreads quickly, and leaves death and destruction in its wake. As we said, southern New England has seen its fair share. In 1942, flames sweep through the Coconut Grove nightclub in Boston, taking nearly 500 lives. Just 2 years later, a tremendous fire breaks out at a traveling circus in Hartford, Connecticut. 167 lose their lives, many of them children. In 1954, the aircraft carrier USS Bennington is cruising off Narragansett Bay when a series of explosions starts a roaring inferno that kills 103 crewmen and injures more than 200 others. The ship limps into Quonset Point, where the grim task of removing bodies begins. Many of the injured are rushed to the Newport Naval Hospital, while anxious relatives gather nearby, awaiting news of their loved ones. And in the early morning of December 13, 1977, fire sweeps through a women's dormitory at Providence College. Flames race through the corridors, forcing students back into their rooms. Some leap to their deaths from windows, others die in their sleep. 10 lives are lost in what was Rhode Island's worst fatal fire until Wednesday's nightclub disaster. A shame that the pictures we take today will join the archives for years to come. Another awful tragedy for Rhode Island.
Next, what is the Great White? When we come back, a look at the band and its music. Now, a look at the rock band at the center of all this. The band Great White used to be on top of the charts, but recently it's been on a downhill run. News Channel 10's Jim Terracani has more.
The band's big hit, Once Bitten, Twice Shy, sold more than 1 million copies. Great White is an LA-based band headed up by lead singer Jack Russell. The band plays uncomplicated blues rock with a good dose of heavy metal. Their first recording contract was with EMI Records, but their first album bombed, and for a while the band financed its own recordings. Then the Once Bitten album came out, and Capitol Records signed the group. Steve Wright, a former local promoter, handled Great White shows 4 times at the Strand Theater in Providence from 1994 to 1997.
When you promoted this band and you saw them perform, did they use pyrotechnics?
You know, unfortunately, I can't recall, and I've been looking for the contracts to see whether or not it was listed in the rider. So I really can't attest to whether they did or whether they didn't.
I'm gonna leave. Great White's success has been on the wane. They were currently on a so-called reunion tour, trying to boost the band's popularity and record sales. But now guitarist Mark Kendall is feared dead, unable to escape the inferno at the station, and the band's future, at the very least, is in doubt.
Great White now in the headlines for a different reason. Let's go back live to the scene now with Gene Valicenti.
Patrice, thanks. Joining me once again is our colleague Ted Daniel. The pictures have been compelling and the stories have been really unbelievable. And yet I keep going back to your first, when you first got here yesterday about 11:30 at night, and you were making that phone call to us without pictures, and we could hear in the background people screaming, the sirens. I mean, what was happening at that point?
When we first arrived, obviously we knew we were coming to a scene where there was something very serious going on. The building, which is now demolished, now is fully engulfed in flames. And I guess the most difficult part, just as a person to watch, was all the people who had come out of the building, a lot of people in really bad shape, a lot of people needing immediate care, and the fact that obviously the firefighters were working as quick as they possibly could, but all those people weren't getting care immediately just because there were so many of them. And the expressions on some of the faces, I know I'll never forget.
Just as in Ground Zero, the Trade Center attack, is television doing justice to the horror that unfolded here, or it really isn't conveying what you saw with your own eyes?
I don't think so. I don't think a TV camera is very powerful, but I don't believe it could capture what the scene here last night.
And as odd as it is, the pictures we've been showing have been relatively mild compared to what unfolded here.
Exactly.
Terrible scenes.
Exactly. And obviously, you know, we're careful with the pictures that we show, and some of the stuff we would not want to show. It doesn't belong on TV.
All right. Ted Daniel, thanks for joining us tonight. Patrice, back to you.
That's right, Gene. Ted's first phone call from that scene is what I will always remember about this, and there were no pictures involved, but that is what has made a lasting impression on my mind. The nightclub tragedy in West Warwick ranks as one of the worst in U.S. history. In 1942, 492 people died in the infamous Coconut Grove fire in Boston. Imitation leather fueled the fire in the overcrowded club. 26 years ago, 164 people died in a fire at the Beverly Hills Supper Club in Southgate, Kentucky. In 1990, 87 died in a club in the Bronx that was supposed to be shut down due to fire code violations. Earlier this week, pyrotechnics caused a fire in a club in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Luckily, all 120 people inside made it out alive. And now we're going to take a break from this fire coverage and go over to Gary Lay.
Well, Patrice, another mild day today with temperatures well above average, up to 51 this afternoon. Our average is 40, and there's the record sitting at 63. Now 36 at the airport, 40 Worcester. It was actually a little cooler earlier this evening, but temperatures are rising now on the heels of a pretty decent southwest wind coming in. The clouds have been thickening up throughout the afternoon and evening. And back in here, you see a little batch of what appears to be some rain and maybe a little sleet in here. Well, I'm looking at all the observations, and the only precipitation I can find reaching the ground is at New York City and Long Island, where it is in the form of light rain. So this is just falling down and evaporating before it reaches the ground. Notice a little break back in here, but there's more coming in across Ohio, and that will fill in rapidly during the morning hours tomorrow morning. As we go to our future track, you see the rain in here. There may be a little sleet mixed in late tonight, but this is primarily a rainstorm with the low moving off to our west, and a rainstorm that's going to provide some heavy rain as well, especially late tomorrow afternoon and evening. Likelihood of some street flooding as we get upwards of 1 to 2 inches of rain in a short period of time. Sun should be shining, though, by Sunday afternoon. So my forecast goes like this. Looks like a wet day tomorrow, rain heaviest mid-afternoon into the early evening, then showers overnight ending early on Sunday, high 52 Sunday. A little batch of snow possible later Monday. Does not look like a significant event right now. Wet on Saturday, milder, windy, and drying on Sunday. Patrice.
Thanks, Gary. A construction worker is dead after an accident today at a construction site in Woonsocket. 33-year-old Walter Gorski of East Providence was working in a trench about 12 feet deep when the walls began to collapse. One man escaped. Firefighters at the scene were not able to save Gorski. A corner of New York's Staten Island erupted in flames this morning. A barge unloading 100,000 barrels of unleaded gasoline exploded at the Exxon Mobil storage facility. One worker is dead. An investigation into exactly what went wrong is underway. And more heartbreak today for the family of 17-year-old Jessica Santillon, who received a second heart and lung transplant yesterday. Neurologists at Duke University Hospital now believe Jessica has severe, irreversible brain damage. 2 weeks ago, she was given organs from a donor with the wrong blood type. The Providence Bruins and their fans raised thousands of dollars to help the victims' families of the West Warwick fire. That story next. Southern New England has certainly come together to help support the families of the victims of the tragic fire in West Warwick, and a good example was found at tonight's Providence Bruins game. News Channel 10's Tim Gray with that story.
The brightly lit sign outside the Dunkin' Donuts Center said it all. It may have been hockey night in Providence, but the P. Bruins Lowell game became a fundraiser for the families of the victims of the West Warwick fire.